well. Good morning, everyone. Just a quick introduction from me. I've been the CRO of Rolls-Royce for 2.5 years, leading a group program, and I've been with the group about 5 years. So I was the CFO of their marine business before this role, which was also in a way a restructuring role as well, because the business had some very particular market impacts. What I would like to do today is talk, it's a little bit of a history lesson. So talk about what we set out to do, how we did it, what we've delivered so far as the program is coming to an end, and what next for Rolls-Royce in the current environment that we are in. And just a little bit of context on that. Half of our business is aerospace, and of course that is the sector that's probably been hit the hardest of all sectors out there, with the impact on travel and mobility in the present, and what that means medium term as well in terms of flying. And before I get in, maybe also just to maybe add some comments. So restructuring is an interesting and topical subject that lots of you will have dipped in and out of over conferences like this, but not necessarily have been heavily involved in at all. But with the COVID-19 crisis, many of you have gone through the classic cycle of first of all dealing with the immediate impacts. Can we survive if our businesses are curtailed or shut down? And if we can survive, which is often a question of balance sheet and cash flow strength immediately, what do we need to do to restructure, resize our business to be relevant going forward? And some of that is obviously very challenging because it has impact on headcount and people, for example. Some of it is also very exciting in terms of transforming business models and using the disruption to our benefit. So we're all sort of in this mix now, and hopefully as I go through this, it'll give you some ideas as to how you should approach a restructuring once you've got past the more immediate survive phase that we've been through, and also give you maybe some courage to experiment and with change and take some actions around that as well. So with that, we get into this material. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So we launched this program. You'll see in the top right-hand corner of this material, Capital Markets Day 2018. So this is all public information. So when we launched this program back at the start of 2018, we were looking for a couple of things: a simpler, leaner, more agile organization, cost savings, so net savings of 400 million by the end of 2020, and it would cost about 500 million to do it. So typically the restructuring, for every pound you save, it'll cost you £1. And then you hope that those pound savings are recurring year after year after year, so you get compounding impact of those. Those savings, for a good part, have been underpinned by headcount reduction of 4,600. And for us, that was from an in-scope base of about 30,000 heads. So about 15% of our indirect and engineering functions. So not looking at direct in this program. To make it sustainable, we also looked at refitting or working on our culture and culture change, through driving more pace and simplicity and efficiency through the model, our operating model, our organization design model, and also empowering the business as low down into the organization as possible. And all of this together, certainly saving money, driving empowerment, realignment of the culture, should drive sustainable and improved returns, which is all about in the end. And then, of course, we are a technology company, so it's all in aid of driving our future strategies around electrification, new product, new technologies, etc., so that this business is both driving returns short term and long term. Next slide, please. So defining our ambitions, and it's quite easy to say on PowerPoint, faster, more agile, to focus on customers, but to deliver it and the financial returns you see at the bottom of this slide, it requires building a simpler business with a true performance culture, looking at delivering on high performing businesses. In our case, we moved from 5 business units down to 3, with each of them delivering their share of the returns, creating a creator partner for the best technology. And this for Rolls-Royce has been a change. So whether it's in improving our back office functions around shared services, or our technology to front end, our digital offerings, it is looking to partner where it's sensible, create where it's sensible, but not trying to do everything on our own. And with the end in mind, to be the world's leading industrial technology company, which is the underpinning of our strategy. So starting with the end in mind in terms of our ambitions. Next slide. And in terms of both, we looked at this and we looked at previous programs, and it was very clear to us that we had a cycle of doing restructuring and transformation programs, which took out cost, but didn't stick. It wasn't sustainable. So we've also had a very strong leg to our program around culture change and accelerating culture change. And we've looked at change as being fundamental, both in terms of how we operate the business, but also the mindsets and the leadership style around how we run the business. And we came up with a number of things: pace through an empowering framework, simplicity through clearer accountability. And I will come back to that in terms of our starting point in our organization, and being more efficient by removing duplication where possible, and all of that bringing more empowerment. Next slide. And our approach to this, first of all, fit for purpose, fundamental change, not just tweaking around with structure and spans and layers, but deeper than that. Focused headcount reductions, not just haircutting, but really looking at where we could take out resources and where we needed to add in, and de-risking the business model. So, in terms of the 15% in scope target we had on headcount, in some functions it's 30 or 40%, and others actually we held or added to it. And we broke the program into 4 main sort of legs: structure, people, process, and culture. So structure and process kind of go together in terms of the performance, or the hard sort of side of things, people and culture, in terms of the soft or the sustainable side of the program. But you need all 4 of these levers to drive change going forward, and to make it sustainable and give that strategic resilience that you would want. And next slide, please. So at the start of the program, we launched the program at the start of 2018. And this is a bit more programmatic here, but the first thing we did is do a diagnostic. So we had come up with very high level principles or targets. So key principle for us has been moving to a lean head office and empower businesses. And a further development of that is, and we would share resources across the group where it made sense. So we had a group business services organization, which we launched, and an innovation hub. But to make this kind of work, really to boil down into work streams and deliverables, there is a diagnostic that needs to be done, and we ran a diagnostic phase for about 4 months. And that diagnostic phase puts deeper articulation to those high-level design principles and targets. And that allowed us to, before this Capital Markets Day actually launch in June 2018, to both finalize the restructuring plan and also design and mobilize, which is really your implementation or execution work streams for a program like this. But as you're doing this, it's also quite important as part of that phase to, get the leadership committed. They need to own the targets. And I wouldn't say we got the leadership to sign off in blood on those targets, but we did get them to sign off on them. And there was a lot of proverbial blood left on the tracks as we kind of got to that process. So restructuring is really difficult. It's really tough. And it requires quite a step up in terms of leadership, ownership, and commitment. But as obviously, as we shift implementation, you course correct and improve as you go along. And at the launch of the program, the Capital Markets Day, we also announced a couple of things. There were some changes to our executive leadership team because of the move from 5 operating units down to 3, but also the change in the structure predicated some changes to how the business was run as well. For example, we had a COO function that disappeared in the new empowered model that we had. We put together a combined Rolls-Royce and Alvarez and Marsal team. So we hired Alvarez and Marsal as our lead execution partner, and they are restructuring specialists, and that's what they do in every single thing they do, and they've been very good. We looked at not just removing headcount as part of our diagnostic, but what would be the levers for doing it. So we came up with what we call stop activity, simplify activity, improve and automate. And we've used all of those levers to make the headcount reductions that we are doing sustainable. And of course, the first things you do are around stop. It's very easy, but then it gets quite harder as you start to move towards the automate. We also looked as part of the structure, not just going from 5 to 3 divisions, but also interplay between the corporate center and the businesses. And at the start of this, we had 4,500 people sitting loosely in corporate functions. We reduced that by about a half as we went through this model. And in doing that, you also look across the center and also the businesses to reduce spans, reduce layers in the organization and increase spans, so you get a lot more efficiency in terms of how the operating model hangs together, and that brings more speed as well because you have less layers. We also brought in zero-based budgeting in terms of how we looked at our cost structures, especially around indirect cost structures. And we've been working on this in terms of the operational restructuring for about 2 years now in terms of implementation. And you see a little bit up there in the top right today. So we are actually reaching the end of this program, and the third phase has been predicated on a deeper operational restructuring into our operational side of the business, which will be what we will do going forward. And I'll talk a bit about that at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So just to put a bit of color to our previous structure, and as I said, we had 4,500 people in the center and a very heavy functionally led organization providing services into the business, but the functions for the most part were group-wide organizations, solid line, and then 5 businesses. So we looked at this and we call it our spaghetti diagram. Nobody can make head nor tail of how you run a business on this basis. Overly complex matrix, poor agility, opaque accountability, absolutely no sense of what costs are flowing around, and lots of duplication. And we had 5 businesses. We decided earlier the marine business, which I was CFO of, would be disposed of. It doesn't quite fit with our strategy, and there has been a far better owner for that business. Likewise, with our nuclear business on the commercial side, we decided that business was subscale as well, and we would look to either integrate the parts of it that are useful for us, or also dispose of those. So we'd end up with less business units, but key to our strategy, a simplified organization. And if we go to the next slide, this is how we've ended up with. So a lot cleaner, 3 focused businesses: civil aerospace, power systems, and defense. And there are synergies between these because they're all based on providing power solutions on land, sea, and air, if you want to put it like that, in defense and commercial. We established a group business services and a lean head office. And the lean head office and group business services are really there to provide services to the commercial parts of the business, which is why we're here. Next slide. And these business units, and it's very easy for organizations to forget the raison d'etre. We are commercial organizations, so it's about looking at our value streams right from that front end. What are our markets? Who are our customers? And in terms of developing products for those markets and the customers in those markets, making sure that the P&L accountability is there, and that those businesses are managing without excuses their P&Ls to generate returns. What obviously they want to be able to do as well, if there is shared services, or what we call GBS, in the center, that they have control over those services. And we've set up a model that is demand-based, market priced. So that if they demand those services, they get them at a market price. If they don't need them, then we don't provide them, and all based on service catalogs and everything else. We also use the group structure, and especially around their innovation hub, to exploit inter-business synergies. And often this is around key technologies. Electrification and digital is two very good examples. Faster and more responsive decision making, because we pushed it deeper into the organization. And of course, we're looking to drive productivity as well. Next one, please. If we look at supporting those business units, and they have primacy, they're the ones that generate the sales and the cash flow, and they're the ones that know our customers better. We have looked at the group business services, and we've put together what traditionally are called transactional shared services for finance, HR, IT, for example, along with professional services. So we've got our property, procurement functions, legal, and some other activities in there as well. Customer-minded mindset, continuous improvement, driving economies of scale, and being smart around outsourcing, offshoring, and automation. And that's a big value driver for us in terms of moving to lower cost locations, and also using partners to help us with automation. The other brilliant thing about a group business services organization is you bring together disparate functions that actually are part of end-to-end processes. So procure to pay, for example, joining up finance and procurement in one function is very powerful, just as one example. But there are lots of others in there as well, where those teams are working cross-functionally to optimize end-to-end process capability. And then the nirvana is to automate afterwards. There's enormous scope from what we've established. We've got about 2,000 people in our GBS right now. But there is, of course, the opportunity, if we look wider across the business, to double or triple the scope of that organization, which drives further scale. But also working with our outsource partners, there is the opportunity to also move activity offshore, and also to potentially automate as well. So it's also acting as a clearinghouse in a way. And because it's multi location and multi-territory, we're bringing in lots of diversity and talent in there as well, to move away a bit from our more UK-centric service provision we've had so far. The head office, about 150 people, strategy, governance, and compliance, that is its function, but and to provide appropriate challenge to the business through capital allocation and target setting, but not necessarily to run the businesses as would have been the way in the past. And next slide, please. So culture change, and I'm just going to pick up on some of these. What you want to do is preserve the pride, loyalty, and our culture elements: pride, loyalty, consultative, inclusive, innovative, and add to that by driving behaviors around agility, simplicity, boldness, and collaboration, and build that into our reward systems and everything else. So we're moving in that direction. But going from complexity to simplicity, taking away maybe some of the gold plating we had to agreed service levels, good enough rather than best in class, clear decision rights, and a cost-conscious mindset. So moving away from maybe more institutionalized behavior to, again, more commercially focused behavior. Next one, please. And you know, this slide, it's quite generic, but it is true. And success really depends on the right people with the right skills and the right roles at the right time, the right tools, and the right leadership and leadership shadow. But we've invested a lot of effort into this in terms of our new model, and making sure we work that, but also preserving and building capabilities. We are an engineering company with very high-end engineering capabilities in IT. That has to be preserved. But we also want to not just be the best in engineering, but also build on business acumen and some of the new skills we need as well. And we've done a lot of work around our leadership teams and other teams to make our leadership group smaller, but also to give it far more balance in terms of rotating in new talent and diversity in there as well. So we've made that team, in terms of the top 100, about 1/3 smaller, but we've also rotated of that smaller group about 1/3 of the talent as well out to bring in new people. Next slide. And then in terms of execution, and And some of you are probably learning this already if you haven't been through a restructuring before. But in terms of what is happening in terms of COVID-19 mitigations, once you get into a restructuring program and you look at the implementation, it's not a monthly cycle. It's a weekly cycle with multiple work streams working across multiple business areas. So it's not uncommon to have 10 main work streams working across 3 different business areas. So that's a slice of 30 different work streams, which are all working on a weekly cadence, so weekly work stream review meetings, monthly tracking of deliverables, the whole sort of governance model around challenge and execution around that. It is really, really difficult and tough. It's a bit more like trench warfare versus the normal cadence of a business. But there are some must-dos that are really important that have to be worked on as you go through this. Driving out unnecessary costs as quick as you can. The more immediate low-hanging fruit and no regret moves that we would talk about. Removing complex and duplicative processes. The unwinding of the spaghetti, of course, is the first part of that. The last part is automation. Developing a real performance culture, not just shuffling all 50,000 of our employees every year through an annual review where everybody is good, but really using it as a selective process and also as one to really improve the performance of our people. And lastly, which will help, of course, in that is an ownership behavior as opposed to being part of the institutional behavior. We are running businesses. Next slide, please. So I know I've gone through that really quick, but hopefully that, I've got 2 more slides. Hopefully with the questions, you'll be able to come back on some of these things. How we've done so far, and this is a slide from our full year results, which was presented on February 28th of this year. And we have delivered so far, at the end of last year, about 10% reduction in our indirect workforce. So that translates into about 3,000 heads out of the 4,600 we committed to, and run rate savings of 269 million. And we are on track to deliver the remaining targets through this year, and the full run rate savings of about 400 million. And of course, the world has changed since we presented this slide. And I suppose 2 things have happened. One is some of the targets we had planned to deliver during this year have accelerated and actually have been delivered already, 1 or 2 quarters ahead of target. And we're rapidly planning for what we do next in terms of the COVID-19 mitigations. So this program, in effect, has probably delivered already about 80% of what it will deliver. And going forward, we will look to close out in this program very, very quick in terms of the final deliverables. But for the most part, it has been a success. There are some key lessons we've learned as well, of course, because it's quite hard on programs like this, which maybe brings me to the last slide. And this is from a press release we had May 20th, so about 3 weeks ago. And we have proposed a major reorganization to the group to address the medium-term impacts of COVID-19. And it impacts all of our business units, but our aerospace, our aviation side of the business mostly. So if we look at Rolls-Royce, starting this year, about 15-16 billion of revenue. Half of that revenue is our civil aerospace business, and about 55% of that civil aerospace business is service. So half the business, 8 billion, about 4.5 billion of that service. And our models for service are quite innovative. So we work with our customers, and mostly we get paid based on engine flying hours. So it's a risk sharing model. But if airplanes aren't flying, like they haven't been, for the last 2 or 3 months, that revenue dries up very quick. And then it comes back based on how quick those businesses get back up to speed. And these are airlines. Likewise, with a lot of excess capacity in terms of airline fleets, At the peak 6 weeks ago, there were 17,000 commercial airplanes on the ground parked. So that also impacts the medium term demand for new aircraft, which drives engine sales. So it has a big impact on our business on that side. So that's why the headline here is that the aviation industry impact is unprecedented. So we've already taken action to strengthen the financial resilience of our business through reducing our cash expenditure in 2020. And this is the classic stuff around capital and R&D investment freezing, recruitment freezes. We have used the furlough schemes that have been in place to help us as well. So this is what I would call what you need to do to survive the short term. We also have announced a major reorganization of our business to adapt to the new level of demand we're seeing from our customers. This is both in flying hours and demand in terms of new aircraft and new engines because of that. And as a result, we are looking to have headcount reductions of at least 9,000 roles from our global workforce of 52,000. So if we put this in perspective, the existing program has already delivered about 30,000, and we're going to add another 9,000 plus on this. The shape of this will be quite different. So for its entirety, the program I've led has worked on mainly indirects and engineering. This program will be probably 2/3 skewed more towards the operational and direct labor force of our business. So less activity on service, less engines being made is blue collar workers, direct labor force, which has always been predicated as a phase 2 of our restructuring, but we hadn't actually expected that a phase 2 would be a contraction in our top line sales as well. So we had been growing as a business before this, so it's quite deep. And of course, I talked about capital expenditure across plant and property and other indirect cost areas, which will follow in line with this. We're spending very little money at the moment, other than paying benefits. This program is going to add 1.3 billion in terms of savings. So if you add that to the 400 million expected from the program I've led, it's quite a big cost reduction from the start of 2018, if you look out to the end of 2021, 2022. So that's quite a lot of savings, but again, you will see coming through that it's going to cost money as well, and it wouldn't be too far off the mark to put a pound of investment needed to deliver each pound of savings here as well. The last thing here, which I've touched on, but the restructuring program that I've been leading, and the announcement here that's referred to as Capital Markets Day, this is going to transition into this wider program now. So as said, this has been focusing on reducing the complexity of our support and management functions, and the program has substantially delivered on this. And rather than move forward with 2 programs working in parallel through the remaining months of 2020, we will incorporate the 2 together to move forward with one combined program. And that's pretty much where we're at. I know that's been a very quick canter through what we set out to do 2.5 years ago, how we've done it, what we've delivered, and what comes next.